Thank you for inviting me for this, for doing this talk on introduction to Sitecore JavaScript services using React.js. So JSS Sitecore JavaScript service is fairly new Sitecore technology. It really made some buzz in the last symposium, and it's really exciting thing going on in that area. So it's actually the people who are doing JavaScript development is ideal for them. There is a rise of JavaScript recently, and a lot of things going on there. So Sitecore joined in that bandwagon, and basically this is the technology for future Sitecore. You will see more and more work here. It's a big topic. I don't think it's possible to cover everything from JavaScript service in a short session like this. So what I'm going to do is I'll focus on building there are different modes in Sitecore JavaScript service. So I will focus in the area of building app in a disconnected mode and deploy that app in the Sitecore. So basically, we will build a small component and then deploy that using the JavaScript service, and then deploy that component in Sitecore. Let's see how that goes. I need to pay the demo guard, but we'll see. Okay. So a little bit about me. I'm a Sitecore MVP 4 times. I'm a technology MVP. I am a strong believer of the Sitecore community, sharing knowledge, helping developers in the Sitecore community. And if you know, it's a very a lot of things happening in the community, and it's a very active community. So if you can join in the community and help other people and also get help from them. I have a blog there, and also I'm very active in Twitter. So that's the way we share our knowledge. Okay, so before we get into JavaScript service, we need to talk a little bit about the Sitecore architecture. This is a slide I borrowed from Nick. He presented this in the symposium, and then also recently he presented headless development in the Sitecore virtual conference, I think last week. So to make JavaScript service or any JavaScript work, your core development platform has to be headless in the sense the browser-based application or JavaScript application should be able to talk to Sitecore using some sort of API, RESTful APIs. So that's that only happened recently. Sitecore actually introduced item service in Sitecore 7.5. You can see on the right side that there is a layer of component or the architecture there, how you can get to the Sitecore item using the Sitecore services client API. So basically you can use RESTful APIs to get there and read the item and basically get to the content using the API. On the other side, Sitecore was always like, had separation of concern about things like we know that in Sitecore, you create template. From the template, you create item, and then you create your presentation separately on the item. So in some sense, the architecture was always separated, but still there is some issue there, because you cannot actually separately access the rendering engine or the presentation layer through API. You have to actually use them as a whole. So on the right side, there was no access. On the left side, the layer you are looking at there was no access to that through API. So that was the architecture that was in the Sitecore 8, but you could actually get to the item through API. So what happened in Sitecore 9 is actually they introduced two things. On the right side, you see item OData service, which is introduced in Sitecore 9. You can get to the items using the OData API protocol. So it's much easier to work with OData standard. But that somewhere it was there with item service, but now you can get to it using OData. But biggest thing happened, and which made this JSS possible, was that the layout service and decoupled content delivery. What that means is that when you create a presentation and you have a structure or for that presentation actually, and you can read that structure using API now. So you can basically see there is a placeholder. You will be putting your component in the placeholder, and then component will have certain fields text or rich text or image, whatever, and those information you can actually read using the layout service. So because of that, now JavaScript can actually read those information from Sitecore and present those information in the in a disconnected mode from Sitecore. So you can imagine now you do not have to have all the layer of this left side on your application. You can actually just use the API to get all those information, even personalization and Sitecore presentation layer. Everything can be read through the layout service. So that's why JSS, actually the prerequisite for JSS is to have Sitecore 9, and they are on the tech preview now, but the recent tech preview need Sitecore 9 update 1. So they use the latest Sitecore 9 update 1, and you need that for the JSS development. All right, that's something about the architecture that needed for JSS. But what is JSS? It's actually an SDK for the JavaScript developer. If you are a JavaScript developer and you want to build your application using JavaScript, it used to be difficult before, creating some sort of application like single page application or browser-based application using JavaScript, because all those layers are so entangled. Now it is possible using this JSS framework. So it was originally built for React.js, and SDK is available for that. But the way they built it is actually the concept is applicable for any JavaScript framework. Currently, there is a sample available for Angular 5. This is not officially released, but you can still take a look. Hey, Amitabh is asking how to join. Chaturang, you.
Yeah, if
we could send him a meeting invite.
Yeah, okay. So I'll let you guys deal with that. Okay.
Yeah, you can.
Sure. 1 second. Actually, Madhuri, will you be able to get an email address from him?
Oh, no, I'll do it. That's fine. You can
Okay.
continue. Yeah.
I can actually. Do I need to get email address, or you are sending?
No,
I
got
Sorry.
his contact.
Okay, I think he sent it to you too.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as I was saying that there was this Angular 5 sample out there in GitHub, but that's not officially released. It's actually something still possible because the concept was built for any JavaScript framework. So, and as I already talked about layout service, just JavaScript, like JSS app connects Sitecore via layout service, which was introduced in Sitecore 9, and there is a JavaScript server package that you need to install, which include this layout service. Also, there are different modes in JSS. And code first approach is one of the one of many modes of JavaScript development, JSS development, and code first is where you actually start your development from the React.js, using JavaScript and React.js. You build your application and then you get to Sitecore. The other modes will be you build your application in Sitecore, but then using the layout service to get the data and build your application in JavaScript. So in this presentation, we will actually focus on the code first approach. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about React.js. So what is React.js? React.js is actually a library for building user interface. If you go to reactjs.org, you will see that there the mission or statement or whatever that says that it is a library. It is not a framework. So it is not like MVC or MVVM kind of architecture. It doesn't tell you how to build your application. When you have Angular has a framework, so you have to build your application in a certain way. But React doesn't tell you how you should build your application. It's just a library. You use the library to build your application whatever way you want. So it has no opinion about how you build your application architecturally. One thing you will notice in React.js is that there is no HTML. If you look at a React application, you will see you will wonder where is HTML. It's a browser-based application, but there is no HTML. The reason there is no HTML is because React do everything using the JavaScript. So it is possible to use JavaScript to actually manipulate the document object model in browser and you can really use JavaScript to create a button or text box or anything. So React library provides that ability. You can use, like, JavaScript and create every kind of element in React. But they do have something called JSX, which looks like HTML. It is not actually HTML. We'll look into that. But JSX is actually look like HTML, but it converts into a JavaScript, and JavaScript is what it actually does the job. And they have a concept of virtual DOM, the virtual document object model, where it loads the DOM in the memory, and every time something changes in the DOM, it actually changes only that element. So it's very efficient. When you change, like, color of a text or color of a button or something, it actually goes through the whole document object model and find out which one is actually changed and only change that element. That's why React is very efficient in rendering the application. Okay, that's enough of React. So to work with React, what you need is actually, you need Node.js in your machine. You need npm with Node Package Manager. So what Node does is actually it gives you the ability to run JavaScript on the server side. JavaScript, as you know, that is a language created for the browser, but Node made it possible to run JavaScript in the server side. And when you can run that in the server side, it can do two things. One is, obviously, it can actually use JavaScript to create your rendering. Also, it can get to the server resources, like file system and things. So a lot of things that you will see in JSS, like using the JavaScript, basically doing some sort of file manipulation, for example, minify the JavaScript and create a bundle or things like that. It all happens because of Node. And then the other side of it, actually, if you do the server side rendering, which in JSS called SSR, you can do that because you can run the code in the Node server, the JavaScript code in the Node server, and it actually spit out the HTML using the JavaScript. And the Node Package Manager is actually standard. If you create some sort of module and package, you actually drop it somewhere in npm repository, and you can import that using npm. So one other thing that is important is actually Webpack. Webpack is for bundling and managing code, and as well as it has a web server. So when you are doing the development, you can use that web server, and basically your application, you can test your application on the development mode. And then there are a lot of other things that web server provides, but Webpack provides, but we don't need to go so detailed in Webpack. We'll see few things here. The easiest way to create a React app application using create React app module. So what I'm going to do is basically I'll start that process, and because it takes few minutes to run that, and then we'll come back and look at that. So I have created a React app already installed in my machine. But I will not install again, but I can create a new app. So I will create a new app called Cricket Card, and using the create app application. When I run this, it will start actually building this application for me in this folder. So let that run while we talk about React app. So the easiest way to actually play with React app is using the codepen.io. You can go to this website and you can actually start playing with React app. I don't know if you have used it. It is not for really React, but you can create any sort of JavaScript application here. But React is one of them. So basically, I can go here and I can start typing my, HTML. So this is what I want to so you can see, like, it gives you the result in the bottom panel, and then, like, you can type your HTML here. So to use it for creating your React app and play with it is actually you have to set up this. So you can add your React package here. So there are two ways. You can either quick add or you can actually copy something. What I found is the reset CodePen has some problem with the most recent React library. So I'm going to paste this here. This is the earlier version, which is working fine. So two things you need. One is actually React, and the other library is React DOM. So React is the library, and React DOM is something that actually mount your application in the document object model. One other thing you need to add is Babel. Babel is a transpiler. Basically, you will be writing your code using the JSX, which is React language, and Babel will take that and convert that to JavaScript. So let's close that, and that is your setup. And let's write a React component. So if I write, I will write it in ES6. Syntax, but you can write in any JavaScript. That's fine. So my component is hello React say, and this is the way you write in React. You have actually so I'll take this oops, sorry. So this is my hello React component, and then I have to actually mount this component to some DOM. So that I'm going to do using React DOM.render method, and basically your component becomes a kind of a HTML element. So you will be writing like hello React. Then you have to provide the element where you want to so you see, like, what I'm doing here. I created a component and I am using this component here. I am saying that, okay, take this component and render this component in this div. Basically, this app hash app is the ID of the div, and I'm telling, like, find this div and add this component there. So that's why you can see that this is rendering here. Now, if you really look at, and this is JSX, I am writing a JavaScript code here, but you can see that this is actually looks like HTML, but this is a JavaScript code. That's what JSX is. So if you look at the compiled JS, which is the, like, JavaScript, you can see what it is doing. It's actually taking that syntax and calling a function called React called create element with h1 as the element tag, and then, like, the message, like I put here, hello Sri Lanka UG in there. So I can actually take this and basically uncompiled, I can put this, and that will work too. Basically, I can replace this with the JavaScript, but what Babel is doing is Babel is taking that JSX and replacing that with a JavaScript, and that's what, like, is showing up. But what is the advantage of it? So in React, everything is component. Okay, so Hello React is actually a component. What I can do is, really, I can take this component and reuse it. So I can say, I can pass parameter, and I can use the parameter here. So I have to say props dot say message. Okay, now in Hello React, if I pass message equal to hello Sri Lanka, okay, so now you can see the power of it, right? I mean, basically, I can pass the message from outside, and the same component can be used for more than one. So I can basically take that component and use it for other messages. So that's a simple example of React component, and React component is just a stateless component. We'll talk about, like, stateful and stateless component later. So what my plan is actually to show you creating a component in React and deploy that component in Sitecore. So first thing I will do is that I will create a component called cricket card. So I'll replace this here. Basically, what I can do is I'll remove this. Okay, so this is something I want to do. One of my favorite batsmen, Aravinda De Silva. So basically, I want to create a cricket card with any cricketers, like, statistics and things like that. So, but HTML wise, you can see, like, I want to create this kind of HTML, and then if I put like a CSS here, I want to look like a card and use that as a class. Okay, so now it looks better. So I can take this and I can create my component in React instead of doing it in the in there. So what my component is called cricket card, and it takes some properties which is like name, team, number of test plays, number of ODI plays, and some description about that player. So I can take that component and let's remove this, and I can put here the next line. So what I'm doing is actually creating a variable called app where I'm using this cricket card component, which is my component name, and I'm passing the name, I'm passing the team and how many test played and all those information, and then I am rendering that component using the React DOM. So what I can do is really I can take this component, this information, I can repeat it. So okay, so one thing about JSX is actually you cannot have more than one element. So if you have more than one component added, so you have to actually add them within a div. So I will just, so this is the component. I have to use the component inside the div. So when I do that, now I have two components. I can actually remove this and I can say this is like search intent. So now I can have another card which is like with different information. So that's the idea, and this should work. Class name, which is called card. So basically now it is giving me two of this same component. I can reuse it. So that's the way you can use CodePen.io to actually create your React stuff here. So let's do that same here in the in my component. So I ran create React app to create my new application. And by the way, I'm using VS Code. It's probably the best editor out there. So it actually created a structure here. Create app creates everything for you. So you can start with your development. What I'm going to do is basically show you the component that I was creating. It can be actually create here too. So let's look at this structure. One thing about the about React application is it uses Webpack and it needs the entry point. So it will start from somewhere. The entry point is actually where your React DOM is. So you can see its entry point is index.js, and index.js is calling this app component and adding that to the root element. So you can look at this app component here, which is rendering some React it's a React component which is rendered there. So I can create a new component here called cricket card. And take my like add this, and I have to import the React library. Okay, and then I have to export this component React library, and then I have to create the CSS. Okay, CSS is this. I have to import that CSS. And then export default okay, so export this this component outside, and then I can go to app.js. Let's remove all this. I don't need this. But then I put my credit card component here. Of course, I have to import that component. When you import JS, you don't have to mention the JS extension. So once I do that, so my app actually using the cricket card component, and then app is used here. So I should be able to see that. So how to run it? You should just npm start. So it will start building. And as soon as you start, it's actually start the Webpack web server, and basically it will show you the component, and you can actually, the cool thing about the Webpack is actually you go change anything in your component, I put some text here, change, and immediately it picks up. It's called hot loading, and basically immediately it will reflect that in the you can see that the changes. It compiles and it actually hot load the there. So that's actually how you create the component in your own machine, instead of CodePen. So this is exactly what JSS does. Is actually JSS, you will be building your component using JSS or React like this, and then you will be deploying this component in Sitecore. Okay, so for a React developer or JavaScript developer, is actually a very what I should say, a familiar area to work on. So disconnected mode, you will start with your React app development, and then you will think about and Sitecore. So once you deploy in Sitecore, there are like a lot of goodies and stuff that is taken care of by JSS. So let's move on to JSS then. One thing I want to mention here is that if you use React, create React app, it actually hides a lot of things. If you look at the package.json, which is the file, actually shows you all the dependencies and the scripts that it runs. It's actually, you will see nothing here. You will not see any Webpack or anything because everything is hidden behind, and React app module actually takes care of that. So you will not be able to see a lot of stuff. So one way to see how React create React app works is actually you can eject the script. So if you say npm run eject, it will actually open up everything and it will show you like how the Webpack is used, and in case you want to actually change your Webpack configuration and basically you want to do something that is not provided by React, create React app, you have to eject it, but you have to know that once you eject it, there is no going back. So you have to be careful about that. So that's the kind of thing, like when you look at when you look at create React app, you will find like where should I go and look at things. So let's dive into the JSS. So I have already created the same application in JSS. It's called SC Cricket Card because it takes some time to actually set it up. So let me see. So that was the React demo. Okay, a few things about React is like, as I mentioned, there are stateless component. Usually the functional component are stateless and class components are stateful. So you have to know this as a React developer. You obviously know that because in JSS you will be able to use like stateless and stateful component. The component which are like dumb component, everything gets from outside, doesn't change the state, will be actually functional stateless component like the one I built. But there are times when you actually deal with multiple components and you need to think about state, because you may have something that changes the component state. Then you will use a class component which is a stateful component, and props I show. Props is actually passing the parameter from outside, and state is like a component state. There are component lifecycle. I don't need to go in detail, but it's basically when you load a React app, it actually goes through different phases, like events, and you can capture those events and do stuffs like one of them is component did mount. So usually component did mount is used for getting data from some sort of source and before you load your component. So those are component lifecycle. So let's look at React JSS disconnected mode demo. Let's see. Okay, so this is the application I built. So what you need to do is basically you need to go to GitHub and get the the sample application from there. So they have some sample application in the GitHub repository. One of them is basic sample, which I took, and then I actually changed that, converted that sample into the one I built for this cricket card. Okay, let's look at the package.json. This is where you will see all the script and all the dependencies. So I change name of the application and things like that. We will be using the script to build the application. So as I said, there is always an entry point for the React application. If you go to let me see, Webpack, okay, and this is where, like, this is not like create React app. This is actually shows you all the Webpack configuration and everything. There is a base configuration and there is a development, there is a production configuration. So it defines how you want to build your application. So if you look at here, there are two things that you need to know. One is that output, which will be like, Webpack will take your code and bundle it and minify it if it is a production bundle to the name of the, like, code and then bundle.js. You all know about minification. But then there are, like, modules and plugins that you can mention. For example, one of the modules here is that if it is JSX code, the use the Babel loader. Okay, so I showed you in CodePen.io that Babel is used to actually transfer the JSX code to JavaScript code, CSS for CSS loader, things like that. One other thing here is actually to know the entry point. So you will see that the entry point is actually the client.js. This is where React starts its workflow. So in that sense, like, if you go to the source code, you will see that this client.js, okay, client.js takes the get element by ID, the app, okay, app element, which I was showing you in the CodePen.io. So here you have the like, not there. So index.html, which has a d by the app. Okay, so that's where it actually puts your like React component, and the component that it puts is actually called root, and it passes the initial state. Now when we do the app, like, development in disconnected mode, it actually this sample or this app comes with some initial state of data and the component. So if it is server-side rendering, then it will actually get the data from the window data. But if it is a client-side rendering like React disconnected mode, first it will go to initial state, and you can see that those are imported here from initial state. And if you look at initial state, is just kind of a placeholder. It says that, like, main thing here is actually the root. So basically it populates the data in this structure. Okay, so here initial state, it actually goes to state.sitecore.route, and get route data is the method it calls. Okay, and get route data method is actually in the data.js. So data.js is actually a file which provides the client-side data when you are doing in the disconnected mode development. So you start with some sort of data. So get route data, if it is slash, then I'll talk about this method later, but basically it takes this route called home, and then it actually takes this data, which is, you can see that I said component name is cricket card, and then player, team, test, and value, and all those. So takes those data, convert them to layout, convert route to layout service format. What it does is actually takes this data, and this method is available in this package, which is a scoped NPM package created by Sitecore JSS team. So it's already installed, the module is already installed. So it gets this method from there and converts this data to layout service format. It actually adds few more stuff here. One of them is called editable. So if these fields are editable, it will add a new field here called editable and add the value with that. So that's what the initial state is. So disconnected mode initial state, those data will be loaded, and then it will be passed to root component, and root component will take that route and pass it to the app component. And also there is this Sitecore context component, which is a context component in React, which takes the component factory and tells it what component should be used for this route data and for this app component. So any component under this actually takes that component factory and calls that component factory. So what is in component factory is really a mapping. So in your data you are saying my component name is component card, and component factory is taking that component name and mapping that to a real component, and that real component is the component that I created here. Okay, so this is my React component I created. So when this Sitecore context pass that component factory and pass that to app, it actually uses that component, and basically this component is I wrote it in a JSS way. There are JSS component available. One of them is text. Text is I say that this is actually a text in H1, and field name is player name, and then text, 4 text component fields and 1 rich text. Okay, and then there are prop types. Prop types is basically define make it a strongly typed component. One of the things that you can do in prop types is you can mention that this component, this field is required. So if you enter that, it will when you are doing validation and things, it will say you have to enter this value. So here prop types is used for what kind of fields are there. It should have value and it should have editable. As I talked about editable before, it will look for the editable field. So basically this is something like field renderer. In real Sitecore concept, this will do is it will take this and create the Sitecore fields when we deploy in Sitecore. So basically those concepts are brought in here in JSS. So one other thing here is that actually you need to look at is so the Sitecore cricketcard.sitecore.js. Here you actually define all these fields for generating manifest. So I'll talk about manifest a little bit later. But we are in root. Root is calling app. Now app is in the index.js. Okay, and this is the app component, and what it does is actually it calls the placeholder component, pass the name of the placeholder, okay, and it pass the route to the placeholder component, okay, and it looks at the data.js and it actually look at what placeholder is that. Is actually the placeholder main. So app component uses main placeholder to place this component in that placeholder. Now you can actually have multiple placeholder under a component, and a component can have like placeholder in it too. It can go very complex. So let's first of all run this component in the disconnected mode. So if I do run it, so the script that run it is actually start. So if I do npm start, it will start building that. And as I showed my other example with just React component build, this is same. So this is running the component, building the component in development mode, and using the Webpack web server to launch the component. So we are on the top of the hour. Shouldn't take too long. So okay, so this is no different than my component. This is just the difference is that I built it in a Sitecore JSS way. Okay, now if you look at, there is this React developer tool. If you look at it, you can use React developer to see how it is structured, and you can see it is the Sitecore context, then app, okay, and then my cricket card, and then there is this component, okay, and you can see there are two things here. You can see my data is, if I can move it, so you can see the editable here is true, okay, and editable field is added here, but this was not in data. This is what I was talking about, it actually adds the editable here, so that Sitecore knows this field should be created as editable. Okay, so that's the disconnected component, and you can see that placeholder component is used here. So let's go back to our example now. This is running. If I change anything, it will be loaded again. Okay, so let's just stop this. Now, how can I deploy this component to Sitecore? Okay, so thing is this code first deployment. To actually deploy it in Sitecore, you have to do a couple of things here. You have to install JSS server package, which is taking care of layout service and other things. Install the infrastructure package for command line deployment using ship. If you have not used ship, ship is actually a module which actually deploy the update package over HTTP. So this is actually optional step. You can, when you generate the package, you can actually take the package and install it manually in Sitecore, but you can use command line to actually ship the package to Sitecore. So if you want to do that, you have to install this infrastructure package there. So a couple of things you have to add the handler for media, JSS media request handler, and the ship filter module in web.config. Also, to use layout service API, you have to create an API key for the application in the Sitecore. So there, then only you can use those APIs. Also, as you know, I am creating a new website there. If you want to create a new website with JSS component, you have to create a site binding. You have to add them in the host file. So those are the steps you have to take care of, and then you have to run the setup script, and then you have to run the config deployment, and then you have to run the codes first deployment script to deploy the code via ship. Let's quickly do that. So one thing I mentioned here is that you have to add a API key. So let's show you that where that exists. So if you go, so this is my demo site, and if I go here, I have to change it to the core database. It will take me there. Okay, so let's change it. Okay, come on. Okay, so if you go here, you need to go to System, Settings, and the Services. And if you look at here, I actually already created a API key. And basically, you have to mention which controller you want to give access to. I just put star here, means everything. You have to give a impersonation user, what user to impersonate. In my case, is anonymous user is fine. And course is if you want to access the APIs, layout service API cross domain, you are coming from a different domain from your browser to a different Sitecore URL. So if you set it to true, it will do that. Sorry, let me change it back to master. Okay, so few things here. First of all, I actually, one thing that I took care of here already is the config. So I actually changed my config to create a new website called SC Cricket Card, and you all familiar with this. Basically, when you want to add a multi-site, you want to add another site. So what complete deployment will do is actually deploy this to Sitecore, and basically then you will have that other site. In addition to that, there is this setup, okay, which adds this API key and ship URL and location of the Sitecore website, where this will be used to ship the package to the to Sitecore. And API key is needed. I forgot to check if the API key is matching or not. So if I go here, let's look at that quickly. Okay, services, API key. So API key is actually the item ID. So this is the API key. I think it is different from my previous one. Okay, so basically the way to actually generate this file is run the setup script. So if you run the setup script, you will say npm run setup. It will ask you do you want to, there is already an existing file, do you want to overwrite it? Okay, you say yes. Okay, so I press enter already twice. So what is the folder name? d://jssdemo.sc. Okay, what is the site name? HTTP SC Cricket Card. Okay, this is the site name. And what is the API key? This is the API key. Okay, so this actually generates that file I already talked about. So this is that. And then if I do the config deployment, basically I will do the deploy config. Okay, so that will take this config file and ship it to Sitecore. So let's do that. npm run config deploy. Okay, so, no, sorry, deploy config. So this will, as you can see, that it says that copying the file to website JSS demo.sc app config includes this easy. So it's already there. And then, like, you know, I should really, let me see, go back to the master, because I deployed the config is actually recycling the process, and we are very close there to deploy the package. So next is actually deploy code first, which means that it will run the build, it will generate the manifest, it will generate the package from the manifest, and then it will deploy that package using ship. Okay, but my application is to, okay, still rebooting. Okay, let's okay, so it came back. All right, so the next step is to run the deploy package. So that's the, here is actually npm run deploy code first. Okay, so once I run that, it will start creating a update package, and it will put that update package here. It will actually create a production build. I think it will create a production build, but then basically it will create the package, and then it will ship the package to like, you know, Sitecore, and load the package in Sitecore. So all those items and everything I created in my disconnected mode, now those items, rendering templates, everything will be created in Sitecore, and I should be able to look at that in content editor, and then I can open up my component in the experience editor. So this takes a little bit of time. One thing, okay, so it's finished. Let's go back and refresh this. That is actually still the code database. Let's go back to master. So now you see that this component showed up here. Okay, this is the component that I created, and this component can be actually loaded in experience editor. While that comes up, I want to, like, you know, tell you something here, that when this code runs, actually these files, Sitecore, everything, like, you know, has Sitecore in it. The process looks at these files and call the manifest, like, you know, here it passes the manifest, and manifest call this add component, and this actually creates a manifest file. For data, it creates the add route manifest, and it actually creates this manifest file JSON, and this file contains all the information about the component, like the templates, rendering, what data to be added in the item, what items to be created, and the package that we just like, you know, shipped to Sitecore was created based on this this manifest. So manifest is a very important concept here, like which uses this these files to generate that package. Okay, let's see. It's coming up. So you can see now the component is available in Sitecore. Now this component is editable, and I can add a new component, new data source for this component. Okay, so now you see, okay, I can go here and change, like text. Okay, so I can change text and everything. So this is the same Sitecore component if I build one. Okay, so this can be saved, and then I can add another component. Okay, so cricket card component. This is our familiar Sitecore development area here. So now where I started with in a disconnected mode. I don't know anything about Sitecore. I am a JavaScript developer. I built my application as JSS asked me to do. I can cricket card 2. Okay, now my component, I can say Okay, so now you get the idea, right? I mean, basically I can create a new component here. So I have now 2 components. So basically I started from the disconnected mode. I am a React developer, JavaScript, don't know much about the Sitecore, but I created the component and everything based on JSS, how JSS wants to do, and then deploy this component. Now I have a Sitecore application. Okay, so that's pretty much the demo. So that's it. That's the way disconnected mode and Sitecore deployment works. So I'll stop here if anyone has any question.
Yeah. Can we do, I mean, you showed the code first mode method. Can we do other way around? Like we create front and then generates JSS from that?
Yeah, so the way actually it works is that you can start from Sitecore also. So basically the component I created in Sitecore, you can actually create that component, the component I created in JSS and move it to Sitecore, but you can create the component in Sitecore and use the layout service to get the information from Sitecore and render the component in your JavaScript application. So actually Nick's presentation, he actually used that approach. If you go back, you go look at his recording in SC Virtual Conf, he actually showed an application where he used that. He used the isomorphic fetch and things like that to get the information from the layout service and build the component in Sitecore first and brought in the browser.
Okay.
And also, there are other modes too. There are node. You can even render this component in the server side in Node.js server. So if you want to take advantage of SEO and things, you need to build the component in the server. It will build the HTML and then spit out the Node. What we are doing here is using the browser JS file, JavaScript to get the component information. but server side in the Node.js, you can run an application to talk to Sitecore and go get those information, because this is the same JavaScript in Node.js too. It will actually get all those information from Sitecore, build the HTML in the server side in Node, and push that information to, like, browser. So that is another mode that works for JSS too.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, with the React.js, we actually I want to know that we are not running inside React. No, we running separate as a separate application. Just we call the using API key.
Yeah.
Create a component inside the Sitecore.
Yeah, so it is actually a completely separate process. That's why it is a disconnected mode development. So you are actually getting the data, information, and everything using the API, like API key and everything there. But yes, I mean, you are getting that data to React, and then using that data to build your application. It is a separate process. Yes.
All right.
So there is a way to, I mean, like code first method, we can seed if you need to populate some test data. That is also possible, like seeding.
Yeah. So, like, basically when you are building it in the disconnected mode, you will, like, use typically you will use some data to describe your component, so that when you deploy the component in Sitecore, as I showed you, the component I created, it has some data. So when I deployed it, it actually not only created the rendering and template, it also created an item. That item, you can say, like, a kind of a test item, okay, to show, like, what this component looks like. Not necessarily, like, you have to use that data. You now the definition of that component is now in Sitecore, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually create whatever you want to do. You probably will remove that item and create a different item and show it differently. The idea here in the disconnected mode is that if you are a JavaScript developer and you do not know much about Sitecore, you can create the application in JavaScript itself, and then you can like, ship that application to Sitecore, and now a Sitecore developer can take over and basically, like, work on those components, and basically that's the advantage of disconnected mode.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Can you show that in that content tree, the components are, I mean, it is like under same node, or is it using the old way, like separate from the templates are created in the?
Yeah, you mean that one thing you can see is actually I created the component. Now there are two data sources here, okay, and you can see all these fields that are added, right?
Yeah.
And basically this, if you can see, like, there is a template was also created. So if you go to the template, you can see the definition. See, these are, like I said, this is a single text, this is rich text. Okay, so everything is actually created here by JSS. And then there are layouts. Okay, so placeholder, that main cricket, there's a main placeholder, and then rendering. You can see, like, this has a rendering here. So this rendering is actually provides that component rendering. So all these are created by JSS when I ship the package. But then again, like, you can use the API to get to this rendering and all this item and placeholder and everything from JSS too.
Also, is it possible for us to control the location, or the item parts of these items that are being created? For instance, if we need to have different groupings for the components, and maybe the layouts, like, is that possible?
Yeah, so actually that you will define in your, like, in your project. Okay, so when you are creating this like, data, okay, this is where you will actually mention what your placeholder is actually, and this is actually the one where you mention what your route will be. Okay, so I think what you are asking is, like, how these different components. One thing you have to understand though, like, JSS is not asking you to, like, where it will create it's just created the component like this, but once the component is there, you can actually change the location of the component. Okay, so I can go here and I can insert, so this actually shows cricket card route, but I can insert a different like, template. I can create a different item. Okay. And I can say, like, what the location will be and things like that. It is just like, when you do the code first approach, you are defining your component in JSS and then pushing it. Later on you can change things, but I think it is possible to, like, provide some information, like, you can say what placeholder is you want to use and where things should go.
Also, just one small clarification. I think this is related to what Chaturanga asked before as well. So in case we change, like, these components, once it's created in Sitecore, if a backend developer goes and changes maybe the location of the component, or maybe say add a new field from the Sitecore backend, how would the script get updated? Should it be done manually in?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I, like, don't know what will happen. Obviously you can actually take that component and add more fields and things. Yeah. Okay, but that means that you have to actually do that on the I think typically what happens is, if you take a code first approach, you stick with the code first approach.
True.
Because because otherwise it will be out of sync. If you like, change anything in Sitecore, the way it will work is that you actually use the Sitecore to build the application and use layout service to get the data. I think that's a very good question. Yes, I mean, that's a matter of, like, how you do the development.
Okay, thank you.
And even personalization and those things we can also defined from the script side?
Yeah, so no, that's actually that's a great question about like about the I was showing that slide. Actually, this component that we built and move it to Sitecore, basically it has access to all the information, like personalization and everything. So in this case, we worked with the code first. So code first is not really defined what personalization and things will be. Personalization will be defined in the Sitecore side. But if you use layout service, it will actually bring the personalization data to your JSS application, React application. Okay, so basically you can, when you are accessing the component, you can look at the personalization rules, and based on whatever rules applies, it should return you the same, the data for the component, and that should work. But in the code first, you do not define any personalization when you doing the development.
Okay.
Yeah. That's actually the nice thing about JSS, is actually you can use all the features of Sitecore, which is available through JSS, and basically some of these features are not actually available through SXA, like DOA, SXA use APIs and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Himantri, for the presentation. I mean, we are very new to this, and I think we got a clear idea on this one.
Right.
Yeah. Will you be able to share the presentation of slides?
Yeah, so I think I can. I'll make some modification and send you guys. So yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Himantri.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.